Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, the co-author of The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. Join with me, as usual, Neil Orfield, the host. Most of the time you hear his voice on the high-stakes DFS podcast on Stochastic.com. Still have to get used to saying stochastic and not Awesemo. And a lot of times I'd say mention something that you talked about with your recent guest, but for the past 2 weeks, the recent guest was me.
Yeah, and we didn't talk about anything interesting. So what are we gonna bring up?
Right. What are we going to bring up that I talked about interestingly that we have not talked about on this podcast already?
I mean, that is true. You and I have talked about just about everything at this point, and then we just kind of re-talked about it on high stakes for the most part. I mean, we talked about a lot of the same stuff. We got a lot of listener questions too, but I don't know if any of it was good fodder for this podcast.
Well, I mean, I didn't expect to be on for 3 hours.
3 hours and 40 minutes.
Oh, okay, even more than that. You had to break that up into two different parts, right? Because
Yeah.
you kept on going with the questions. I'm like, how many more questions are there? It's like, okay, questions. You get a couple of questions, and we're out of here. I don't obviously, you know me. I don't mind talking for a long period of time, but
It worked out.
Not,
I mean, we got 2 episodes out of it, so it worked out really well for me too.
Okay.
So I didn't have to find another guest, and then after that, we were like kind of burnt out, man. That was 3 hours and 40 minutes. Let's take a break until the end of August.
Okay, so that's technically your first season.
We had been talking about breaking it up into seasons just for a break, and it's kind of a downtime in terms of listeners during the summer. It's like people, especially because it comes out, Friday afternoon, which I consider kind of cabin season. People are going up to their cabins. People aren't really around listening to podcasts. So
Well, how privileged are you that you think everyone's going to their cabins?
In Minnesota, everybody is going to their cabins, and they're not always nice cabins. And actually, I have not been to a cabin yet this year, but I know several of my friends go to their cabins every weekend. I think that's a fairly common thing.
They don't listen. They don't listen to a podcast at the cabin.
Probably not high stakes when they're going up to the cabin with their families. I don't think they're throwing on a DFS podcast.
Well, in the first season of your podcast, outside of the past 2 episodes, what have you learned the most? What have you gleaned? What would high level things about how high stakes DFS players, and when you say high stakes, it could be high volume, it could be professional. I mean, like the term high stakes is kind of a misnomer because I wouldn't consider either of us to be high stakes players, but still definitely high volume players, and also in comparison to 99.9% of people that play DFS, where we play for a decent amount of money, right? We may not be up there with, playing 50,000 a slate, but for most people playing 2, 3, 4,000 a slate, even a couple of hundred a slate is like the upper, like 99th percentile of DFS players. So from talking to people that are more like us, I guess, or above, what are some things that you learned or you feel that a lot have in common?
I mean, honestly, the biggest thing to me is the wide range. Like there's the difference between my guests is so huge, ranging from Geo RBX88 has won 3 milli makers, and he doesn't do any of his own like data analysis. He's not using any kind of advanced math. He's just kind of a gut player, and he takes to the point of like, this player was bad when I played him, so I'm going to just cut him from my lineup, from all my. I'm never going to play him again because he was so bad, or at least he claims that. I don't know that it was ever true, but he's won 3 millis just by kind of using his gut, intermixed with. I know that he used the stochastic projections. I think he's used a range of projections along the way too. So it's actually honestly fairly similar to myself in that he's using the projections, which kind of get him a baseline of like, this is what a good lineup looks like, because the projections kind of get him there, and then he just uses his gut to kind of X some players out or get a lot more of certain players. So there's Geo on the one end of the spectrum, just playing from his gut, to Nerdy Tenor on the other end of the spectrum, where he's not even telling his program what to do. it is using computer learning to figure out the kinds of correlations you want and the kinds of lineups that you want to play, and it's getting better over time. Kind of the complete opposite end of the spectrum. So I think it's one of my main takeaways is there are a lot of different ways to win at DFS. Like, it's just people can win in so many different ways.
Well, I think that I'm gonna interrupt you. I
Okay,
think that's a misnomer.
that's new.
Right, that's new. Interrupting you. I don't think there's many different ways to win at DFS. I think there's many different ways to get to that point.
Sure.
But
Okay.
the mathematical concepts of winning long term in DFS, you can't change. So there's plenty of people. So like the difference between someone that doesn't know any sports and just basically programs a computer to do it. I mean, this is past projections. This is just like, I don't even know how to play this game. I'm just gonna try to build something that could teach itself how to play, to the more instinctual players. They're still conforming to play when you're playing larger GPPs or GPPs in general. That, well, I can't play the popular players completely. And there's some amount of correlation here. In baseball, I'm not just playing 8 one-offs. I am stacking, or I'm playing a quarterback with 2 wide receivers, or something. Like there's some correlation element, there's some leverage element, and there's some projection element of, even if you don't have projections of, well, who's in the position to do the best today, right?
One thing that I'll push back on a little bit is I did have several guests who basically said they don't use ownership. And I know that you and I have kind of talked about this, that you don't entirely believe them. And I don't entirely believe it, because I think even within the conversations, they make reference to, well, a lot of people are going to be playing this guy. So like they still
Well, that
make
means they're
reference to,
using
even though
ownership.
I know,
That's
I
the
know.
point but that's the point I'm making. That
Yeah,
they
yeah.
are they're building plus EV lineups that, even if they don't realize is conforming based on these mathematical principles, they are. I know plenty of gut players or more instinctual players that, especially if they're playing like the small field, higher stakes contests, that are like, well, I know everyone's going to be playing this, and I'm going to be I'm going to play this guy over that guy for whatever reason. It could be, who knows, day of the week, who knows what. But even though they're not like, I don't know the exact ownership of all these players, nor do I care about the ownership of all these players. I just know that, in basketball, like, most people are going to play this guy, I'm going to play that guy. Like,
Yep.
in and of itself, that means you are using ownership, right? You
Yeah,
are
I know.
applying leverage. I mean, that's really the point that I'm making, is that even if they're not even aware of what they're doing, like,
Right.
you get the plus EV lineups, the lineups have an expected value regardless. How you get there, maybe there's 74 different ways of getting
Right.
there, but you can't get to negative expectation lineups and then be profitable long term. I mean, you could get lucky
No.
every so often,
Sure.
but I mean, but for the most part, all your guests, all 18 besides me, and even if you want to include me as the 19th guest, like, we are all building positive expectation lineups for the contest that we're in, having a long-term profit. Some of the swings may be big, right? The ways that we build our bankrolls may be different, right? But ultimately, we're still getting to profitable lineups. It's just a matter of how you're getting there. But the actual construct of what a profitable lineup is can't change. Whether or not I play this guy or that guy, and because of some mathematical, some ownership plus the projection, and then you have nerdy tenor with, I don't know the reason why this is profitable, but my program says it is. And then you have RBX that it's like, well, I'm just Xing out this guy, and it just so happens he's overpriced and probably shouldn't play him anyway on this slate. And he's going to play this other guy because someone else is playing that. And then you look at, you put all 3 of our lineups together, and they could have different players, and be like, well, if you ran a simulation even after the fact and ran them all out and be like, okay, these are all profitable lineups to get to that point, but it's never getting to the point where people are building bad lineups. So it's a matter of multiple ways of getting to good lineups.
Yeah. And I would say another thing that they all have in common is everybody is working really hard to get to the lineups that they get to. So they all have very different processes to get to these lineups. But like, I mean, Travis Petty, who's, the example, and Bills fan, are kind of similar in my mind, that they're the ones who, say that they don't use ownership as much, but they're also putting in a ton of work getting to figuring out like which players are undervalued by the rest of the field. So they're still getting to very different lineups just by doing a lot of analysis, figuring out rotations better than everybody else, and figuring out projections for the entire field better than everybody else. And Gio, I know, even though he's using his gut, it's not like he's doing it in 10 minutes. Gio spends a lot of time working on his lineups and thinking about the plays that he's going to play. And obviously, Nerdy Tenor built out a whole program, and we make it sound like his program does everything, but he built that program, and I'm sure there was a lot of work that went into that. So I would say that's another thing that everybody has in common is they work very hard, and also they are, I think, they're all coming about it from a unique place relative to most of the field, probably just because of how much work they are putting in. They're all, I mean, they're obviously all very contrarian players, either by design or just by their process getting them there. But yeah, I think they're all extremely hardworking and extremely contrarian players.
Well, I think the biggest difference, one of the big differences, is if it's a word, backtestability. Like the more analytical programmer types are going to be much more precise and much more able to backtest their own strategies.
Right.
To say, well, I'm building this way. I'm running lineups, running simulations, running everything, and then backtesting everything and going, well, based on this is what actually happened. Get a whole bunch of data and then go, well, if I did the same process again, backtest, what would the results be? So comparing like your actual results versus simulated results. That would be a way to judge your process. But with more instinctual players, which I would say I'm included in that, and probably you're included in that also.
I'm included in that.
Is that it's almost impossible to backtest. Like you have to be reliant more on a large sample size of actual results. Like my backtestability is just, did I build my lineups relative to ownership properly? And if the ownership was off, then I could judge my lineups and go, yeah, I should have built different lineups. But the problem is that will always exist slate after slate. So there's no way to essentially reverse engineer it. Like whatever I do conceptually, I have to do each and every time. There's no way to necessarily speed that up or put it in a box and say, well, if you just do this type of thing. Like if you talk to RBX88 and go, well, if you're going to teach someone how to play the way you play, like it's impossible without, well, on this specific slate, I'm going to play this way, but on that slate, I'm not. And on this, like, it becomes a complete it depends fest.
Yeah.
Right?
Which, I mean, that's true for us as well. Us RBX, I feel like, players who are playing instinctually, it's always just, it depends. It's every slate is so different. And, people ask me, well, what kind of stacks do you build in baseball? And I'm like, well, it depends on the slate. I mean, it's always going to be an it depends fest. And I think if it's not, you're probably playing it wrong generally. I mean, if you're not conforming to the different slates that you're playing, you're probably not going to be profitable long term, because some slates you're just going to be playing completely wrong. Now, maybe, I mean, we had this discussion about taking a macro approach. So I guess maybe there are ways that you can do the same thing slate after slate and it being correct. Like, I mean, the Brian Jester, for example, another great guest, takes the approach of just playing extremely high variance lineups every slate. And I think the majority or all of his MMA lineups are extremely high variance and not going to be duped. He takes a very different approach than like yourself, or not a very different approach than yourself, but you take a more conservative approach in terms of getting to, we've had this discussion a million times, but lineups that are sometimes duped 3 times that you think are probably higher EV or going to hit at least more often, that they're more worth playing than some lineups that are not duped at all, which is something that I tried to replicate as well. I think I tried to get to more like your approach, although it doesn't always work, as I saw this past weekend.
Why? What was wrong with your lineups this past weekend?
I guess
you made money. I saw you made a little profit. You made a little nibble.
Yeah, I made money for the first time ever, and I think it was probably my worst set of lineups ever. I had a lineup that was duped 115 times. I had another lineup that was duped 80 times, and then I had like 13. I had 88 lineups, and I think I had 13 that were duped 10 or more times. So that's what was wrong with my lineups. And I had some uniques, but it was overall. I looked at my lineups immediately after lock and was immediately like, oh god, this is like this is so bad.
Well, it's
It's
11. It
not
was
going to go
11
well for me.
fight slate because one of the fights got canceled, so it makes duping really difficult. Mine on this past slate, all to me, all you really had to do to make sure you weren't going to get duped is just to remove, just set a group so you only have one of Onama, Fiziev, Lawrence, or Dos Anjos, because those are the four most owned fighters on the slate. And just as long as you have only one, you're probably gonna be fine. But that's for that specific MMA slate, like we were talking about. It depends on the slate, right? It
Yeah.
depends, but there are macro concepts that obviously that we talk about on this podcast that I talk about in the course. But it's how to apply those concepts for on a slate to slate basis. I think that's the commonality between all of your guests on the podcast. I think it's the ability to remain objective to the situation. So, like in all of the episodes, and I listened to them all, it's very rare to hear anyone that's a high stakes DFS player, high volume, quote, professional or serious, whatever term you want to use, to say things in absolutes. Like to say things that, like, well, I always do this. Like I didn't listen to episodes. Well, you do very well in NFL. Yeah, because I always just do this. And it's
Yeah.
like you typically don't hear that. You don't hear. I never heard anyone say that they have a system. Right. This is my system. I get that it. They have to be 7-point spreads. Then I have to line this up. Like you never hear any of that. Now you hear a lot of that from like amateur people, right? From recreational players, even sports bettors, right? They have a system, a horse racing system type of thing. But the best players don't have systems. They have the ability to look at a slate objectively and go, in general, yes, probably going to stack five guys on DraftKings, probably. But it's a 3-game slate, and there's some dynamic with the pricing that's off or something. And you'd be like, I don't think this is the slate. I think you're going to run into too many of this and too many of that. I think this is slate. I'm just going to take 3 guys from this team, right? And I'm going to leave 500 on the table. It's like, well, that's looking at a slate objectively. We have a slate tonight that on DraftKings that they forgot to price up cores. That's like, oh, okay, you can play 2 10K pitchers and stack Coors Field. It's like, oh, isn't that great? And
But
it's
everybody
like,
else will do it.
right? No, yeah, of course, no one else will do it, right? Well,
Yep.
remaining objective to the slate, it's like it's a large enough slate that some people would think, okay, well, if people are gonna if everyone's gonna do that, I'm going to stack cores but play neither of the 10K pitchers. Or they're going to think I just won't play and I'll X out cores because that'll be different. And it's like it doesn't have to be one or the other, right? It doesn't have to be you either do this whole thing or rip out half of it or rip out the other half of it. It could be a nuance of, well, let's take a look at the Padres lineup. It's like what combinations may not be as owned, right? Everyone's going to play Machado and Voit at first and third, but those are power spots. Maybe even if they do have a good game, you could find a first base or third baseman that has 2 home runs in one of the other games. So it's like, why don't I play kind of like almost like the crappier hitters? Everyone's playing Voit, but less people are playing Hosmer, and they're both first base eligible. So I'm going to play Hosmer, and people are going to fill Nola in their catcher spot because it's a Coors catcher at 3K. It's like, well, why don't I play the Rockies catcher who's kind of overpriced, but it's still Coors and they still have a 5.5 total? Now you start piecing your lineup together, and you're like, maybe you're not playing both 10K pitchers, and you look at your lineup, and you still have 5 Coors Field bats, one of the 10K pitchers, and it projects for like way higher than your, I'm going to X out all the chalk type of lineups. And it's like, maybe that's a good lineup, right? Thinking objectively about the slate where you're not just setting these hard rules. I noticed in 8. I mean, you notice amongst any any sharp player. It's very rare for them to talk in absolutes, and I thought that was highlighted in a lot of the interviews where no one could no one they conform to my stupid question rule, right? If you could answer the question with a yes or no or an exact number, then it's probably a stupid question, and most of their answers were not yes, no, or an exact number.
And I feel like I get a lot of DMs from more casual players who will basically tell me, I figured it out. And like they think that they found some magic formula for this is how you win at baseball. I figured it out. And I haven't seen any of those players go on to be successful. And I'll try to lead them, away from that a little bit. But I think that, yeah, that's true. That's a lot of more casual players are looking for some magic formula or some system to be like, oh, this is how you win at this sport. Whereas the better players just adjust over time and figure out, look at each slate differently. So yeah, I think that's a really good point, that everybody who has been on doesn't talk in absolutes and does kind of adjust to every slate
I just
individually.
always wonder what those people that think there's a magic formula, like, do they legitimately think that, like, there's all this content out and it's just like, no, this is all us obfuscating the fact that there's a magic formula.
Right.
Like, if there was a magic formula, like, I think in terms of, like, from it's the same reason why I put out Theory of DFS, the course, is that if there's a magic formula, someone's gonna let people know and sell it, right?
Yep.
If there happened to be a magic formula, someone would be selling it for $500 a pop or something and making tons of money without risk, right? Because now you can just make money without having to. Cause even if there was a magic formula, it doesn't work it's not. Well, you win first place every slate. Like that doesn't exist. I don't think even casual players think that exists. But they
Right.
think it's like there's a profitable. I just have to plug this in. 5 minutes later, I get 150 great lineups, and over the course of the year, I'm going to make $1 million type of thing. Like that. That's what they think, and I just wonder. Do you just think we're all in on it? On just like we all know the magic formula, and we're just not telling anyone, and we're just like, okay, Neil, me and you, we got the magic formula. We were in the secret collusion chat. We got sent the magic formula. And now we have to come up with ways to explain daily fantasy sports that really doesn't matter as long as you had that magic formula, just so people like just don't get on our scent. That's like,
Right.
oh, we're kind of making up all these concepts just so you go down the rabbit hole a long enough time, and hopefully you never find the magic formula. Like, it just feels weird. Like, how does that make any sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes sense because there are 30 of us who have the magic formula. So we just take turns winning. So it's, obviously you don't win every slate because you have to share it with the other 30 people who have the magic formula. So I think it actually logically makes sense that
No, but
there
logically,
is a
then
magic formula.
what's all the con? If we had the magic formula, then what?
Sure.
Why are we talking for an hour plus every week, and I do 5 shows and I'm answering questions like why would I
Well,
be
like you
doing
said,
that?
we don't want other people figuring out the magic formula, so we have to throw them off the scent, tell them about things
Okay.
like
So that's
correlation
what
and
it is. So we're
yeah,
purpose. Like, if it wasn't for the fact that we're content providers in DFS, people would end up finding the formula too quickly.
exactly.
So that's the reason why Stochastic puts out content and Roto Grinders puts out content, is because we
Right.
all know there's a magic formula and we share it, and there's only about 30 to 50 of us, and
Right.
we every day one of us wins, and it's like, well, once we're at like 50, like the 51st person, now our prof now we want to win once every 50 days, not once every 51st day. So it was easy enough for us to find the magic formula. It took us a while, but once we found it, we're part of the secret collusion chat group. Uh,
Is this
so
any crazier than the QAnon stuff that we've been hearing for
right,
the
I
past?
know. That's
I mean,
I'm trying to
for
put it.
real.
It's like so we're coming out with content just so it's an obstacle so you never find it. Right? It's like as long as you keep on listening to us, they won't. It's like the Wizard of Oz. You won't see the man behind the curtain type of
Yeah.
thing. And if there weren't any content, there'd be 50. There'd be 500, 1,000 people that would be like, oh, I found the magic formula. I found it behind the door. And knocking on our secret collusion chat, going, I want to be one of the winners.
So this brings up an interesting conversation that we had on High Stakes, where you at one point said you think that 100% of people could be profitable DFS players if they put in the work. You think the people who believe these kinds of conspiracy theories could be profitable players if they
Well,
put money?
I have both an optimistic and pessimistic view of humanity at the same time. I think it's I don't know what it's called. I think it's the reverse Dunning Kruger effect. I looked it up. There's nothing that necessarily fits. The consensus effect kind of fits it a little as a cognitive bias that uh, I believe other people like. Why wouldn't they have the same abilities that I do? Right?
Interesting.
It's the reverse. It's like the Dunning Kruger effect is that stupid the stupider you are, the smarter you think you are.
Yeah.
Right? So like
But it's
stupid
also the
people.
opposite. I think that's still the Dunning-Kruger effect, that the smarter you are, the less confident you are in your intelligence. I think that's also part of Dunning-Kruger, isn't it?
No, but it's how you reflect on other people. So like the so if you the stupider you are, the less likely you are to judge someone else's intelligence. So you believe that you're smart about something when you're really not. So the more
Sure.
right, but the smarter you are, typically it goes the reverse. Typically, the smarter you have a imposter syndrome type of
Yeah.
thing where it's like I'm not special. Like, and I say that it's like I don't think I'm the smartest person at all, and I look up at other people and go, they're way smarter than me, right? So like I got to up my game. But it also is the reverse of how you reflect on other people of like, because I don't believe I'm special and I'm like, what I'm doing is not magical. It doesn't take that, to me, it doesn't take that much intelligence to understand that I can't understand how 95% of people don't. Like
Right.
that, and a lot of it, I can understand not being a numbers person. I am a numbers person. So at least I
Mhm.
have that self-reflection of like there's some people that aren't numbers people. And there are also some people that don't learn in the ways that I learn. I get it.
Mhm.
But the laziness. That's the thing. And it's weird for me to say that it's it's a it's a I think it's a brain thing because I can't change it because even with my wife, like my wife is the complete opposite of me. Okay, so like my wife, number one, actually has emotions and shows compassion, and I mean she's in a field where she does that. She has
Right.
ADHD, right? She's not a necessarily good learner. She's more of a trial and error type of. She's not a read an entire book and then know the entire subject type of thing and just read everything. She doesn't learn that way,
She
right?
sounds kind of like me, actually, in a lot of ways.
Right. She needs a lot more structure and a lot more visualization. So she
Yeah.
learns many more by watching other people do it.
Hmm.
Well, someone like me, like I don't have to watch anyone do it. Just get I will watch and outread everything possible on the subject, and I'll rewatch something for 40 minutes just to get the 20 seconds that okay, that's the nugget I need, and then go
Yeah.
to something else and go that's the nugget I need. So like I learn that way. So to me, like watching 500 hours of video isn't like absurd to do because it's something that if I really wanted to do it, that's exactly how I would learn. So
Hmm.
like the laziness factor, like my wife doesn't process. It's hard for me to explain because it's in my brain. It's almost unfathomable that she can't process information well. Like as far as like a Google search, for instance.
Okay.
So it's like a matter of so she'll ask me a lot of times, like she's cooking some chicken dish or something like that, and she'll ask me. Said, "Can you Google how long to what temperature do you need to get like thawed chicken up to, or so like some type of thing like that?"
Hmm.
And I'll look it up. I'll look it up. Now, Google will not give you the answer. It will just scrape data and show you sites that
Yeah.
have the answer, but it's not just one answer because that question doesn't have like it's exactly that. So you have to look through and go, well, on this recipe it says put in the pot for 15 minutes and cook at 380. And then the next one says, put in the pot for 12 minutes and cook at 375. And then the next one says, put in the pot for 18 minutes and cook at 350. And then have to go, and then you have to decipher, like, what's the right answer. And it's like, I looked through, and like, if you're putting it in somewhere between 12 and 15 minutes and around 375, that sounds about right. And that's all she needed to know.
Yeah.
But as far as her Googling it, the information overload, like, to her, she always describes it as, it feels like it's information overload. Like, it either doesn't give me the direct answer, or it makes me have to look through stuff. And I'm like, that's exactly the way that I look at stuff of, like, I don't even trust the first answer. I'm going to go and click through 18 different results just to double check. And, well, in this case, this recipe called for this, so maybe obviously one of the recipes was a slow cook recipe, so obviously that's why the temperature is lower. This one is being done in the microwave, and that's why it's 3 minutes, and obviously that doesn't matter. Like, her brain does not work in a fashion where she's able to decipher information that quickly. Like, so it's just to her, it's just an overload of information. And for me, I sit it's like I sit in a like a chair in the sun and just let the information I want a fire hose of information to just wash over me, and I could decipher through the 95% of crap to get to the 5% that I need. So, like, from a looking up perspective, whenever people are like, well, how do I do this? It's like, well, just Google it. Like, why are you wasting my time? Like, this is not something that I need to. I'm not special. Remember, I didn't invent this stuff. I Googled it. Someone asked me, how do I do this thing in Excel? It's like, type it into Google. Why am I explaining? It's an Excel. It's Microsoft Excel. It's been around for a while. You think there's a YouTube tutorial on that function? How do I count these lineups? Well, it's the count function, right? If I need to learn, and I learned everything in Excel, you know how? By Googling everything. I don't know how to do this. Excel, whatever. And then a lot of times, the first result isn't the right answer. You have to go through and go, okay, well, how about this? What's this application? And then there's 3 YouTube videos. And next thing,
it's just easier to ask Jordan.
Right. But to me, it's easier to go through and do all, like, I'm not going to, it's going to be harder for me to understand someone individually explaining it to me than me. Let me look at everything, and then let me be the one to decide what's important and what's not important. Because what ends up happening, Neil, in reverse, typically explaining things to me, people get very frustrated. Like, because because to me, everything has to be very precise and literal because of how my brain works. I'm probably on the spectrum somewhere. So, like, imagine directions. Right now we have Google Maps and stuff like that, but even before 2004 internet, right? I had MapQuest. I'll print out directions. People would tell me how to get places, like to a comedy club or something like that, and I'd go, just give me the address. And they go, it's like, just the address? They said, yeah, I'll just type it into MapQuest. It's like, and then a lot of times people are like, well, I don't trust MapQuest. I'll tell you how to get there. And I go, nope, don't tell me how to get there. I trust MapQuest.
I'm the same way as you as far as directions go. I'm terrible with directions in general, but I know that if I can just print out directions, I can follow instructions. I can just follow the directions that are given to me.
But that's not the point that I'm making. The point that I'm making is that you get directions from someone, and someone says, take the second light, and I go, the second stoplight.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Right. Like, sometimes, because what ends up happening is that there's a flashing, like, fire light, like a yellow one, and I'm like, is that the second light? Right? Because that is a light. Is it a stoplight? Go on your third left. And some people count the street that you were just on as the first one. Sometimes they don't. Like,
I bet you hate the image checkers to see if you're a human. I mean, everybody hates them, but
right, because I have to look at very detailed and go, is there really a bike in that square? I don't know. It looks like the tire is very close, and it takes me longer because it's like, what are you doing to me? Like, I'm going to make sure that there's, how many flowers are in the whatever. But that's the point that I'm making, that like, why I view, when you said, like, how much percent of the people that play DFS, 100% should be able to Because I view it's like
Should be.
why can't you learn how if you want to do it, why can't you? Because this is mostly not it's not hard. And most of the information is even out like it's not even 2015 anymore. It's like dude, like if you spend 40
The tools are
bucks and you
there.
got everything.
Yep. Yeah, the tools are there. There. Yeah, I agree with you that most people should be able to be good at DFS. I don't know that that's ever going to be the case because there's always going to be people who just can't figure it out. I think that I have less confidence than you do in a majority of the people. I think that a lot of people could be very good at DFS who are not. But 100% to me is an unrealistic number. I think 90% is an unrealistic number, but probably a lot more people could be great at DFS if they put in the work than are.
But do you think it's magic formula syndrome? Because that to me, I think that's the thing that stops the most people.
You think because it's too many people think that there is just yeah. I think that probably is a part of it. That people are trying to figure out what the magic formula is. That could be
Well,
part of the reason.
I related very much to even content creation because I mean I've not just done content in DFS. I mean I've been doing it for a long time in other fields. That the first thing that like 95% of people fail for two reasons. One, that they quit too early, or they take too many shortcuts. Right? So many people I talk to that I used to do video game content. I used to do that. I used to do a tech podcast. I've been doing content stuff for a long time. Even comedy, obviously stand up comedy. And like even in stand up comedy, it's like the comics that succeed are the ones that just focus on writing the best material. Like here's the only two things you need to be successful in stand up comedy. Said be so good that you cannot be ignored. Right, where you just get on stage and you kill, and no one can deny the fact that you're good. And number two, put yourself in the position to get opportunities. Like just you don't have a spot that night, you're still hanging out at the club because you never know who you meet and what opportunities come up. If you're just going to stay at home and only go out twice a week or something like how number one, how are you going to get better and how are you going to put yourself in the position to get opportunities? Now, you do that for a long enough time and you get good and you put yourself in a position, you'll get the opportunities. What the opportunities are, who the hell knows? But so many people look for the shortcuts. They go, well, what exactly do I have to do here? How did you get this? What did you do here? Instead of like, well, are you so good that you can't be ignored? Well, I don't know. Well, if you don't know, then maybe you shouldn't be seen. Maybe there are a lot of times in the entertainment industry that you don't want to be seen, right? That you're not good enough, like you because you only have one chance at a first impression, and
Sure.
there were several times early in my career that I had an audition for something that, truthfully, I didn't deserve. I didn't get. But should I have been auditioning for Conan O'Brien 2 years into doing stand up comedy? I was good for it 2 years and good for an 18-year-old, 19-year-old.
Yeah.
But compared to, going on the road and doing it when I was 28, 30 years old, I look back at my set from back then and go, geez, how did I ever think that would get on Conan? Like, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. And it's like, why would I want the booker of Conan O'Brien to see that set? Because then
Right.
by the time that they'd have to forget who you are the next time, because if you don't get it at that point, it's like, well,
Right.
let us see you in 6 years, right? Type of thing, as opposed to just doing the work and putting yourself in the position to get opportunities, not forcing opportunities, or even in the content space for DFS. It's like, what? Well, how'd you get this? How'd you get that? It's like, I just did stuff myself that I enjoyed doing, right? And I just kept on doing it. And I just put myself out
Yep.
there. I was on Twitter and I interacted with people. That's my version of putting yourself in the position to get opportunities. Doesn't mean me tweeting myself. It means responding for other people, right? And not in a trolling way, in a helpful way, in a joking way. Have some memes, have some everyone's hanging out type of thing. And then people notice you. And it just, as long as what you're doing is too good to be ignored. And then you do those
Right.
two, and next thing you know, 4, 5, 6 years later, 8 years later, 10 years later, I mean, who knows how long it takes? You're there. But there's so many people that, I mean, I've talked to several people over the past year about doing, fantasy sports content. And they're like, what should I want to start, whatever like that. How do I X, Y, and Z? I said, what do you enjoy doing? I don't know. It's like, take whatever you enjoy doing, whatever you enjoy talking about, whatever, and in whatever medium that you enjoy the most. So if you enjoy writing, write. If you enjoy talking, talk. If you enjoy video, video. Did whatever you want. Do you want to do a newsletter? You want to do a blog? You want to do whatever it is, just do it. You want to do a YouTube channel? Go do it. Just whatever it is. Do you enjoy breaking down? Just you're big into pitching for MLB, so just do pitching. Don't and you're doing you're doing for DFS stuff, and you're just like, you're the pitching guru, right? So just do, not because that's a good niche. Just because that's what you enjoy doing. Who knows what it's going to be 3 years from now? And then I'll say something like that and go 3 years. It's like, well, I'm looking to get something like how do I start? Like it's
I
like
want to start now. I want to make money. Yeah.
Right? It's like you're not.
Yeah. Nobody knows who you are.
Right. Nobody knows who you are, and
Even if you are writing something that is can't miss, people can't figure that out right away. They need to see your results over the time. They need to see that you're actually
right.
doing a good job, that there is value in what you're putting out there. Yeah, it's impossible to
Yeah,
jump
but
right
here
in.
here are the questions that I get though from
Yeah.
these types of people. It's like, what they talk about you. They ask me about YouTube thumbnails, right? They ask me about headline writing, right? So it's like it's a lot of the stuff that digital marketing wise that I know how to do, which is one of the reasons why the theory of daily fantasy sports thumbnails on YouTube aren't good. I know they aren't good because they're not designed to be good. They're not designed to be clickbait because these are 2-hour long episodes, and there's no value to me in getting 6,000 people to click on it for them to go, oh my God, it's 2 hours. And then for those types of people to get bored after 3 minutes.
Right.
Like I don't care about. I want them to all look the same. So you see that there's a series of different people on, and they're numbered. And if you want to go through and listen to something from 2 years ago, go for it. It's in the description what we talk about, and that's what it's designed to do. Now, could I do clickbait thumbnails? Of course I can, right? I could do the 12 things you wouldn't believe. I could do the Twitter threads. It's not like I don't know this, but for what I'm looking to do, I'm not looking for the biggest audience. I'm looking for the most valuable audience. So for my intended purposes, I don't care necessarily about that. But for someone that has no idea what their audience is, has no following, has no monetization methodology, nothing set up. It's just like, I want to do content because it looks fun, and then they're worried about headline writing, and it's like, no, literally don't worry about any of that at all. Like, none of that is going to matter now. The whole point of what you're doing, you're going to open mic night, right? So when you go to open mic night as a stand-up comic, you ain't going there with headshots and business cards, right? You're not at that point yet. You haven't done stand-up yet, right? So don't worry about what type of business card you have. Spend the time that you would make on a business card on writing more material. That's getting better, right?
Okay, so here's my question. So I recently had this question. A guy that I know a little bit was telling me that he wants to get into DFS content, and I told him, start making your own stuff, and I told him to be very present on Twitter. That was kind of the only real advice that I could give him, was start making your own stuff about things and be more present on Twitter. But it's not something that I really have a lot of experience with. But for somebody who is trying to start their own thing and starting to create their own content, how do you even get somebody to click your link to begin with? The first time, how do you get somebody to click it?
Because they know who you are.
So being more present on Twitter, I guess that
That's
kind of
correct.
covers it. Yeah, let people know
What
who
what
you
I
are.
what I what I did, I was part of a video game site that we did tactical content for Football Manager, which is a soccer simulation game that's very popular, especially in the UK. Not so much here. I was big into the game. I mean, I was a nerd of the game. It's very similar to Out of the Park Baseball, if you know that, or Baseball Mogul. It's like one of those types of games, but really detailed for soccer people. Uh, so this is like late 2000s, 2007, 2008. I just played it a lot. So I was just on the official forums. I was on this site's forums, and this this all the official site had a huge forum that I participated in, and like there were like two guys that like moderated the tactics section of there that had their own site, and they ran simulations. It was really nerdy stuff. They really got into details of that. So I was attracted to that. So I went there, and I just participated in. I just basically I was there, participated in forums and discussed stuff, and got to the point where, uh, since I did stand up and since I know audio video, I'm like, I made a little blog, a little like on like Blogspot or something like that, or I co-host. Like no, I made my own host because I knew what I was doing. I think it originally was on Blogspot and then I co-hosted it, uh, and I would do like memes, so like Football Manager meme, like jokes and stuff,
Mhm.
and just post them on there, fake news stories, right? That all you would only get if you were part of like the official game forums. So it was a lot of inside jokes and whatever. Uh, and then through that, because they knew me from the forum, the people clicked on the link. They clicked on the link and go, and this is fun. And then because it was funny and no one was doing funny stuff, people shared it. People post. I would see it posted in other forums around the space in the Football Manager forums and go, "This is funny. Look," and then people would know who I am, right? And then
Yep.
no one was doing a podcast. I mean, this is like 2007, so there weren't that many podcasts in general. So I'm like, I'll do it. So I did the first ever Football Manager podcast, and my first guest was the head of the tactical forum because that's who I looked at, who wrote all the good tactical articles, and we had a conversation. And since there was literally there's never a show about this game. That first episode, like in the first week, got 25,000 downloads,
Oh wow.
which for now doesn't sound all that impressive,
I mean,
especially in
it still is to
2000.
me.
Even now, it sounds fairly impressive.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, how did it get to that? How did it get there? Well, I wouldn't have gotten anyone to click on the link or even know who I am without actually putting in the time. And to me, I wasn't putting in the time as like a nefarious thing of like, I'm going to act like I'm interested so I could sell which didn't have any sales or anything. Just like, no, I'm hanging out here. I see people contributing articles and stuff like that. What can I do to contribute to this community?
Yep. Talking about what
And
you enjoy talking about.
I did what I enjoyed exactly, and it goes from there. And then I ended up becoming like the webmaster of that site, and then we all built strategy guy, and it took off from there. But like by the time there was any monetary benefit to doing all of that, it was 3.5 years later, right? And then as when we started our Twitter account, because this is like 2009 ish, so this is like very early Twitter. How do we gain traction on the site? I ran the site's the Twitter account. I just used Twitter search because since I was been in digital marketing for God knows how long. I used TweetDeck, or there were a lot of other third-party tools back then. TweetDeck wasn't even part of Twitter, to search for the game. So I just put in the search term of like FM, F Football Manager, FM 2010, and just found people that were tweeting about the game. A lot of times complaining about a bug, having a problem with the game because it's a very complicated game, and all I do is just respond to everyone. Like I literally respond. It would just be on my screen on a second screen, and it would come up in like every half an hour or so. I'd go through, and someone's like, "Oh, I just because the game just came out." So it's like people like just got in, can't wait to go home, and blah 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 blah. And the video game design, glad to hear. What team are you going to start with? Right, like that's all I'm doing is just engaging, and then people are like, people always have problems depending on their computer setup, on how to there's a driver issue on a PC. All of this information is in the official forums. So, like, it's all posted there, but of course, people don't fucking look for it. So, all I did was just leave the forums open and give anyone. I was doing the tech support for the game because the official video game site was just there on Twitter promoting stuff, just like never replying, just like, look, here's the thing, and it comes out tomorrow, and blah, 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 look at that, like a marketing message. And I was just replying to everyone as possible, and we built up thousands of Twitter followers because people would then follow you and go, okay, right? Especially back then. And it's like, well, this is before you make any money. There's no money. This is just getting involved and getting known so that when you do something, then it's like, oh, no, here it is. Imagine me coming out with the theory of daily fantasy sports in 2015. But first off, I was barely playing, so that be able to teach like this is, I didn't learn most of this, but no one knew who I was. Like, imagine me doing this podcast would have not 3 listeners. My mom would listen or something. But that's what people wanted. That people think that, oh, well, I'm just going to do that and just like, no, be around. I mean, I'm not even just talking about content. I'm getting back into just like even learning about DFS. Sure. It's like if you are serious about becoming a profitable DFS player, this is not the type of thing where it's like, I'll play on Friday and then not play for 2 weeks. And then, maybe I'll play this week of NFL, and then I'll play this NBA slate, and then not play NBA. And you're just like kind of like moseying around, and then go like, what? Like, why can't you tell me what's the magic formula, Neil? Why can't you just tell me the magic formula instead of like putting in the work day in and day out, and not looking for and like to me, I find that most of the questions are people looking for the magic formula. It's like I
agree with that.
You're still not understanding the concepts.
So here's another question I have in terms about the discussion of the percentage of people who have the ability to be profitable at DFS. I think that you and I both come from we both kind of naturally think probabilistically and kind of have a natural grasp of like how likely of an outcome is this. I think that there are a lot of people who struggle a lot more than we do with the Yankees have if the Yankees have a 20% chance to be the best team on a given slate, a lot of people, because they have the highest odds of anybody, they can't get themselves to stop thinking about it as being like 100% chance.
Right. They don't understand that 80% of the time it's some other team.
Right. Yeah. So they have a lot of trouble with that concept of like, yes, this is the team. Like if you're going to play one team that has the best chance of being, this is the best cash team, your cash team is still going to lose most of the time. So I think a lot of people have trouble with that concept. And what I'm wondering is, do you think that the way to get around that is just by playing? Like experience is kind of how you learn to think. You think some people are just a lost cause?
Yeah. I mean, on this past MMA slate, in one of the Discords I'm in, people were tilting the fuck out of Ronnie Lawrence.
Yeah.
Okay? Ronnie Lawrence was like one of the most popular fighters on the slate because he's a chain wrestler, right? He was 8,400. I played very little of him. I played a ton of his opponent for leverage purposes. And Kakramanov took Lawrence down, and Lawrence couldn't even get back up. You know why? Because Lawrence really isn't a great defensive wrestler. It's just that he goes for a lot of takedowns, and against weaker opponents, he has success doing that. And for DFS scoring, we love it, right? So people are tilting the fuck out of like, Ronnie Lawrence was, quote, the best play. And like, he wasn't the best play. It's just that in his wins, he puts up a lot of points. If he wins. And people played a ton of him, like, well, I'm looking for 8 takedowns and everything like that. It's like Ronnie Lawrence was a minus 130 favorite, right? We're not talking about if he was minus 1,500 and lost like that. I can understand going, yeah, like 94% of the time he should destroy this guy. And I don't know, this is the 6% of the time he got rocked. He got wrecked.
Yeah.
Minus 130, right? So people are treating this like they're tilting the fuck out of, like, I can't believe I played this guy. He sucks. And it's like what did you expect? Like, it's like, well, I expected him to take him down 2 or 3 times around and dominate on top control. It's like, yeah, but he was only a 53% favorite. I mean, like he wasn't a big favorite. Like the other guy had like a 47% chance of winning. So it's like,
Yep.
well, everyone, I read all these articles that everyone loved him. They said, yeah, they love him for DFS purposes when he wins. But the likelihood of his winning was like about a coin flip. So it's like, yeah, when he wins, he puts up a lot of points. When he loses, he doesn't. Right? So like that whole probabilistic thing of like, just because he projects well for that outcome, like how often is that outcome?
I was trying to support your point though, Blender, that everybody has this capability. And now you're giving the counterpoint to it, saying, yeah, some people just can't get themselves to think probabilistically.
Yeah, but
And
it's how do you not get to that point? I like, how do you, that's the brain. I don't know. My brain matter doesn't. It
so you're saying
mind.
that 100% of people could be good at DFS if they were just smarter. That's kind of what I'm hearing.
But I don't. But is that a smart thing? Because I don't consider it having to do with intelligence. There are I played plenty of people playing poker. Great poker players are awfully dumb, but when it comes to poker, very smart. Like just like people that couldn't express anything that they do on a poker table mathematically at all.
Yep.
Right? Like no mathematical, but they instinctively, like, oh yeah, I'm going to call that bet there because there's a lot of money in the pot. And he bluffs off it enough. He could be bluffing, right? And it's like, that's a dumb way of putting it, but the correct decision, right? Like everything involved, like you're not thinking probabilistically. It's like how often does this thing happen? I don't know, but it doesn't happen that often, right? But he doesn't know how much it really does or doesn't. He just knows that like this happens about a coin flip. This happens about those differences.
Let me rephrase it. Not if they were smarter. Everybody could be great at DFS if they had better instincts. Then I mean, it's still kind of the same thing. It's like, yeah, if everybody's better at DFS, they'd be better at DFS. Like I don't know. I think there are people who are just like you said. I think there are people who can't figure it out and are kind of a lost cause, and sometimes even with experience will have the wrong takeaways. So they'll just remember. A lot of people have major recency bias, so I think going back to Gio, I thought that this was one thing that he said that I was like, I don't agree with this. He was saying like he cut out Chris Middleton. He was saying like, oh, Chris Middleton, everybody wants to play Chris Middleton when Giannis is out, but I played Chris Middleton and he had a horrible game, and I'm like, well, that's just a really small sample size and not a good reason to cut him out. But I think that there are a lot of players who, and obviously Gio is not typically one of those players, but I think that a lot of people take that to the extreme of like, oh, this guy sucks, he was bad for me, I'm never playing him again. And I think that there are people who actually mean that when they say it. So I think that it's a lower
yeah, but I don't think that that's as big of a mistake. Most of the time, if you wanted to X out 2 or 3 players, you're not going to get punished as much for it, because unless that happens to be some extremely high projected player, that it's not going to matter. I could look at today's baseball slate and go, I'd never play Merrill Kelly. And be like, well, if I don't play 8% own Merrill Kelly today, can I still make a good lineup? Yeah, of course. So like, if I just X'd out, I'm never, Lance Lynn, dead to me. Like, well, he's 8.2K and you could play him. You don't have to. I mean, like to me, that's not the mistake. But thinking in terms, like, to me, it's a macro issue. Like, and of getting it's the same people that complain about the weather. I think that's a good way of putting it. Like in the general population, we're thinking very like micro for DFS, but
yeah.
You turn on the weather. I mean, this is old school because you have a weather app. I'm not watching the morning weather the Good Morning Kentuckiana, whatever the hell here. But the weather person will come on. Showers are in the area, right? Today, get your umbrella. There's a 75% chance of rain. Like we get up to 1.5 inches. Like storms are coming in later today. Said we got 82% chance of whatever, and then you get your umbrella. If people take their umbrella to work or whatever, and they get out of work at 5:30, and it's still not raining. It's still fine. And then at like 6:15, there's like some light rain, right? A little bit of light rain, off and on, and then it's like you get home and you're like, wow, the weather person sucked. The weather person made it out like that it was going to rain a ton, but you don't realize that 20 miles north of you, it rained a ton, right? Because the weather forecast was from 12 hours ago. So it's like based on the percentages, that's why the dude said 75-80% chance of rain, because 20% of the time the storm goes a little bit north and misses the metropolitan area, but kills the fucking suburb right above it. That their weather forecast may have been like, well, you have a 40% chance of rain, right? They have a lot. They have like this probably goes south of you, right? You don't get this, and next thing you know, there's hail. But that was the 20% chance, right? Of how, right. But for in that community, they look at the weather person and go, that weather person sucks, right? He said 20% chance of rain, and it was a hailstorm, and
the weather person is just your DFS tout in this scenario,
right? And then in the city where we are, that it barely rained, and we're looking. Why was he making it out that 80% chance of rain and possible hail, and I got to leave work early to make sure that I don't get stuck in a whatever, and then nothing happened. Well, this weather guy sucks. And it's like, no, the weather guy was perfect, right? He's not calling. He never said 100% chance of rain. He's just going based on what I'm seeing. Here's the probabilities. But people take like, is it gonna? What they're asking Neil, what they're asking the meteorologist, is it going to rain today? And you know what the meteorologist is saying? It depends.
Yeah. Right? They want a yes/no answer.
Right? They want a yes or no answer.
Yeah.
That's why, like someone like Kevin Roth, like I admire what he does, because people do, like
I don't think people.
No, I don't think people get the difference between what Kevin Roth has to do and what he is an actual meteorologist, but from what a news TV meteorologist does. Okay, that here's the biggest difference, and people don't get it. They really don't get it. Once I say it, you'll get it. The meteorologist you see on your morning news or whatever has to give you a prediction of rain for an entire metropolitan area, right? So there's an 80% chance of rain, but like you may be in the south end of town, right? Like I'm in the center part, maybe slightly south. It's going to be more rain. Like who knows, right? Something's coming through. Where is it going to hit in town? Kevin Roth has to forecast the weather of a 1 square mile block as opposed to a 50 square mile area, right? So there's a lot of times where in Atlanta, especially, right, they get pop-up storms, or even in Denver sometimes, in Colorado, where it's like there's storms in the area and they could pop up anytime, but it's not a line. It's like if it was a line, then he could say, yeah, they're probably that this rain's coming in around 10:30 or something like that, right? But other than that, it's like, oh, there's stuff scattered around, and then what happens is that he lists it as like yellow, green, and then there's some 2-hour rain delay, and people go nuts. And now the game doesn't get postponed, but it's like the pop-ups happen. I mean, like that he wrote that. He literally wrote that.
What I thought you were going to say is he has to not only predict the weather, but he also has to predict what they're going to do with the game.
Right.
The decision of the people who are making those decisions.
Right, but I'm not even counting that. I'm just counting like he has to make a weather forecast on a very small area that because there are a lot of times that you take a look at the actual radar and it looks like, oh my God, Cincinnati is going to get killed. And Roth is on crunch time going, don't worry about Cincinnati. It's like, dude, there's a line of storms coming. Like, it's going to be approaching the stadium in like 30 minutes. It's like, nope, they're going to peter out, and most of the storms are going to be north. Only because from a half an hour, like 12 hours out, the forecast models are, who knows?
Yeah.
But from this point, it's like he's looking at proprietary models, not just going to your weather app. And he could see the differences in how they forecast weather. And he's just looking and goes, well, based on what I see here, like, you don't have to worry about it. It's like, what's the worst case scenario? Maybe a 10-minute late start or something. But if you just looked at it yourself, you'd be like, I got to avoid this game. And then there are some other games where you look and it's like, it doesn't look like there's much weather in the area at all, but you don't realize that something's happening, and that, 2 hours into the game, Roth says, basically, once this comes, the game's over, right? Like, they ain't playing through this. But, like, all of what he's saying is still a probability. So, like, when I even listen to Roth or read his weather report,
yeah.
like, I say this in Discord, it's like, it's his job to give you the probabilities, and it's your job to assess your risk on whether or not of what to do. So if you never want to take on any risk whatsoever, if there's any semblance of rain or anything, just X all those players out.
Which is, I mean, it's the exact same thing with like the top stacks tool, or whatever the RotoGrinders equivalent is. It's the exact same thing. We're giving you the tool is giving you the exact probabilities of this team. I mean, according to this simulation, the probability of this team being the top stack on the slate. You have to decide, okay, weigh that against the ownership. How much am I going to play of that team?
Yeah, but people aren't even getting to the probabilities. That's the point that you were making before.
Yeah.
Like when the top stack tool says so and so, like I'm going to assume that on today's slate the Padres are number one on DraftKings, definitely by far. Like the top, it's the not understanding what the total combined probabilities. It's if something is, let's say in baseball on a 15-game slate, like I'm using the extreme example. It's a 15-game slate. There's 30 teams. And one of the teams, top stack, top team, highest scoring team, whatever you want to call it, is 50% likely. Right? Which would be absurd. That would
never happen.
Yeah. Right. That would never happen. That's why I said an extreme example.
Yep.
50% likelihood. That also means that there's a 50% chance that one of the other 29 teams is the highest scoring team. Right? Yep. It's not, even though the next team after, let's say the Padres are 50% chance of being the top stack, the next team is Colorado at 7%. Right? People would look at that and go, well, why am I bothering? Like, I'm talking about the person that doesn't understand probability would go, well, this is a lock, right? This is why I'm just going to play the Padres in all my lineups. Look how much more likely that is to happen than the next team, because they look at all the other teams individually. They go, well, the Rockies are 7, the Royals are 6, the Yankees are 4. Like, all these teams have very low numbers, and this team has a very big number. It's like, yeah, but all the teams underneath it combined still are 50. So half the time, one of those teams, who knows which one it's going to be, right? Obviously, some a little bit more than others, are going to be the highest scoring team. And then you know what ends up happening half the time? This person plays, Padres in all their lineups. They score 4 runs, right? And some other team on the slate scores 12. And they go, well, the top stack tool sucks. It's like, it does. It literally told you exactly what it is. 50% of the time doesn't mean all the time. Even though that one number is very big than the other numbers. But the problem with thinking that way is that I think the biggest hurdle, Neil, is to, and is this my brain not working properly? Of not immediate, like, look at the reaction that I said of that type of person. The reaction is the information that I saw was wrong. Right. Instead of the information that I saw I did not interpret correctly. And I think this is getting back to your 18 guests plus me on your podcast.
19 guests plus you, by the way.
19. Oh, there was. Oh,
We broke you up into 2 episodes, but it was still both were episode 20.
oh, both were okay. I thought it was episode 19 and 20. Okay, so I missed one random person or something, even though I listened to them all. I did not hear any single person ever blame in anything other than themselves. Like, I think that's a commonality between all high stakes players. We may jokingly tilt stuff, right?
Sure.
Right? You may jokingly go, of course, Chuck, of course, overowned, whatever, overowned Yankees get there, the fish win, right? But it's like it is what it is. But we don't blame the tools. We don't like, the difference is that recreational player, the more casual player that doesn't know how to interpret information correctly, that has the information and still doesn't understand what it really means when they look at a median projection and go, when the pitcher scores -6, and they go, well, the projection is wrong. Instead of, maybe I'm not understanding what this projection means, right? But if you're constantly going to external sources of, the reason for my failure is because they're wrong, this is wrong, that's wrong, this, like, maybe it's you, right? But good players tend to, I tend to think the complete opposite. I tend to go, I don't think anything's wrong with anything that I'm looking at. I just think I screwed up somehow. I just, like, if, something was off and I made a mistake, or, long term, that tends to even itself out. You're not making mistakes every single day, right? You're making CSV errors, and like that's a different story. But I'm not looking at a pitching projection and go, like, if Josh Fleming today puts up 27 points, going, well, his median projection was 14. The projections are wrong. It's like, well, I just look at that and I look, okay, based on the bat, his ceiling sets 26.4. Now, to a lot of players, and I've heard this plenty of times, Josh Fleming will score 28 points, right, or something, and they go, well, the projection is wrong. I go, no, he just hit like a 78th percentile outcome or an 80th percentile outcome. He says, no, the ceiling says 26. So if that's the ceiling, that's the most that he could possibly score. And the fact that he scored more, that means this is wrong. And you obviously could hear the difference between, it's like, the ceiling doesn't mean the 100th percentile. Right. The ceiling means, depending on what you're looking at, either the 75th or the 83rd, you have to ask what that number means.
Usually it'll say.
Right. But a lot of times, if you just said it's around the 80th percentile, that would typically be true for most things. So, like, those are just percentile outcomes. So, like, people are complaining about something. It's like, no, your complaint is highlighting the fact that you see these numbers and you still don't know what they mean, right? You see the top stack tool and you still don't know what they mean, right? And how do you get better? By understanding what they mean, rather than saying, well, obviously this is wrong, so I'm going to unsubscribe from this place and then go to the place that has the right stuff, right? That has the magic formula, right?
Which happens all the time. People switch sites because they get tilted about 3 days in a row. I did what the tool said I should do, and it didn't work. So
but the tool didn't say to do anything. That's the point.
I know. Yeah.
The tool didn't say anything, right? This guy, they had a 22% chance of being the top stack, and when the Dodgers, remember last week or something? The Dodgers were immense chalk and then gets like complete game shutout by Chad Kuhl or something.
Oh, yeah, in Colorado, yeah.
Right, when that happened?
That was great.
Right? Oh, in Colorado also, right? It was in Coors, and they get shut out by Chad Kuhl. And he put up a 98th percentile outcome.
Yeah.
Right? Like, well, the top stack tool was 27% chance. That means 73% of the time some other team. Like, when you put it in that type of thing, it's like, how do you not get this? Yeah. Like, I thought this would be easy to me to say, well, yeah, they're the most likely, but not compared to 73% of the time some other team.
Yeah.
I don't know what other team, but some other team outscores them. And I'm like, okay, now you get, and I'm sitting there going, please get it. Please get probability. Please get it.
Yep.
Right? It's like, oh, yeah, when you put it that way, I get, yeah, I shouldn't be thinking that the top stack means lock anymore.
Yeah.
And so
Generally,
many
the most
times,
likely outcome is still an unlikely outcome, and
right,
people just have a lot of trouble with that concept.
right. Or just in poker, you see that also.
Yeah.
You have
In
pocket
life, I think you
aces,
see that.
right? And I'm just saying, like the common time you see this is in limit poker, limit hold'em. You're playing limit hold'em, and you're playing on a very loose table, right? So you're in first position, and you raise with pocket aces, and you get called in 7 spots, right? So you're going 8-way to the flop with the hand that, as of this moment, has like a 38% chance of being the winning hand at the end. But your confidence is like 100%, right? Because you have the best possible starting hand. And then the flop comes down, and if you saw everyone else's cards at that moment, you may actually be an underdog right now,
Yeah.
right? But even if you're a favorite now, you're up against so many other hands that, as of this moment, it could be that you're now like a 50% chance of winning this hand. But there's 7 hands out against you. Like, one of those other hands will beat you. I don't know which hand it's going to be, but as long as everyone stays in, you're only going to win about half the time. Of course, you're collecting money from 7 other people, so it's profitable in that scenario. And then what ends up happening is you get beat by 8-2 because someone turned 2 pair, right? And you kept on going, and you babble, and it's like, these people and whatever. It's like, no, you were actually in a very profitable situation. It's just that you're not going to win it that often, but when you win way more money than you should. Because when you raise, you got 7 callers instead of 1 or none, as you should have gotten with an under the gun raise from someone that probably doesn't play many hands, and they still called you anyway. So most 40% of the time, you make like 6 times, 7 times as much money as you should. But it also means you're going to lose like 2/3 of the time also. But like, that's something poker players understand, good poker players understand, but you'll see, you'll trust me, you'll see at the table all the time. They'll slam down the cards. I never win with pocket aces, right? Now I'm raising with garbage now. Like no, you may have played the hand perfectly, and maybe they even played the hand perfectly, but they only bet that when they were ahead, and they never called when they were behind. Because someone was stupid enough, even when they made a hand, to not value bet it. So you played it you literally maximized the amount of money that went in the pot when you were the biggest favorite, and you put it nothing when you were behind. And you're bemoaning being in that situation. Well, every good poker player is like, I'd love to play in that type of game. Right? Because, but you have to understand, you're going to lose with that hand more often than you think. Against 7 opponents than you are against 1 opponent. But that's the very same thing with the top stacks of like, when there's 30 teams on a slate, and the top stack is 17%, which is very high for 30 teams on a slate.
Yeah,
that still means 83% of the time it's not. Like, but what they want, what I think a lot of the problem is what they want is, well, if it's not that team, then who is it?
right.
And they don't like the answer of it. Well, you see all these teams underneath them that are kind of like tied with each other. Like there's like 12 teams that are like within like a 4 to 6% range. I mean, any one of those.
Yep.
Well, which one?
And those are the exact odds.
Those are the odds. What happens today? I don't know. Right? So could be any one of them. That's why, especially in baseball, it's like baseball's more of the type of thing where, dude, you could play so many different lineups that, like, well, I don't even know why people ask me, is this a good lineup? Is that a good lineup? Dude, it's baseball, right? Basketball is so much different. Basketball, I can take a look at a lineup and go, why the hell are you playing that lineup?
Yeah.
Like, because most of the time, the pricing is so inefficient on most slates that's kind of like, unless you're doing something, you're probably playing 3 of these 5 players, right? And then figuring out what you want to do after that. So it kind of limits your choices. But in baseball, other than maybe pitchers, like, you could get away with practically anything. And I think that's what confuses people, right? When it's like, oh, you could play 5,000 lineups that are all about the same expected value. And they're like, well, which one is the best? And I go, none of them are. And then their head explodes. And they go, well, how do you win? By just playing. They said, you play as many of them as you can, and you hope you get lucky on a night. I mean, like, just hope to realize the EV of these lineups
Long enough
tonight.
sample size.
Right?
Yep.
That's what it is.
Yep. Still not working out for me this year in baseball. After last year, I felt like I was winning a tournament every week. This year, I have not won any tournaments. So
well, you have to make it up from last year. I mean, it's
true. It's very
DFS
I think I got a little bit lucky last year, and I'm getting a little bit unlucky this year, and it evens out.
But people confuse luck. Like luck is variance.
Yeah.
Not luck. Playing a bad
Right.
lineup and winning is luck.
Yeah.
Playing a good play. I mean, but that's what anyone will say, right? I didn't play any bad lineups. It's just it's a variance, right?
Right.
Right. Well, it couldn't have been me. But I don't think to close it out with all of the interviews that you've done on high stakes, like that, I haven't heard any. I didn't hear anyone that was like when I win, it's because of skill, and when I lose, it's because of luck. It's always the other way. It's always the other way around. Of like, I think I'm playing well. I think I am. I may not be, and I thought I played well, and I managed to get first place at $1 million. And
Yeah.
but someone could have easily just like not caught a pass, and I come in third. Like, so like that, the difference between first and third, that's not me. That's just that's luck.
Yep.
But people misconstrue that to I'm only successful because of luck. Because then once you think that way, then there's no skill in the game. Then why am I even bothering listening to any of this? Or just I might as well just be throwing random darts.
Right. If every lineup is the same.
Right.
Yeah.
If every lineup is the same, you might as well just throw it as 150 lineups. You can do no wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Cover all combos. My question now is, so I agree with you that every guest that I had, all 20 guests had the correct approach, the correct mindset. How am I going to find 20 more guests like that for season 2? That's
You
going to
still
be the
got
hard
people
part.
at Stochastic that you haven't.
Oh, I know.
done.
There are plenty of people out there.
Right. I could always come back for another 2-parter.
All right. I'm in.
As I said on the show, said you'll always know when Neil ran out of guests or had someone cancel on very short notice if I'm on again, or if I'm on at all. But this time it wasn't. This time you planned.
In this case, I wanted to have you on. Yeah, I thought we got to have Blender in there. We were contemplating maybe ending season 1, so I thought I should get Blender in there before the end of the season at least. Stop saving you for a rainy day. I figured because I wanted to have you on the podcast at some point. But
you still need Adam.
I need to convince Adam to come on.
What he doesn't want to come on?
I think he has concerns about giving up Edge.
He come on this podcast.
I know, and I think I have no idea.
He's on shows. What do you mean giving up the edge? He's on shows on Stochastic.
Yeah. Talk to Adam. Petition Adam to come on.
I don't care about him.
I'm talking to the audience now.
Oh. Apparently he's dating someone
there are
now
plenty
that's
of
way out of his league. I don't think he wants to come on.
What's that?
I think he's dating someone that's out of his league. So
okay.
He's spending the time doing that, I guess. I don't know.
All right. That would make sense.
Okay, so Neil, Player Q DFS on Twitter. People could search for the High Stakes DFS podcast. If you want to listen to more of me, it's 3 hours and 40 minutes of it in the past 2 episodes. And the next episode is what, August 25th or something?
I believe August 26th. It's a Friday, late in August.
For basically the 1 week before the NFL season starts.
Yeah.
Because typically that's when we're in the lull period.
Yeah.
Typically end of June, July, beginning of August, and then once NFL preseason starts, like that's when things really start to pick up. Okie doke. I'll see you again in another 2 weeks, and
sounds good.
Hopefully you'll win more than like $12 in MMA.
Yeah, we'll see. 2 more weeks.
Okay, as always, the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com.